Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Trails of Cold Steel Northern War, a great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So it is so interesting to obviously get this insight into something I haven't thought about either. Like, I knew this was getting us an insight into the Northern Jaegers, but I was like, all right, I'm so stupid. This is our first, true full-blown insight into any Jaeger Corps, but I think the Northern Jaegers are probably going to be different from any other Jaeger Corps. Because yes, we've met people from, obviously we had Randy to be kind of Randy and even Shirley, our insight to the Red Constellation, and Fee, Zeno, and Leo, and even Rutger being our feel for Zephyr. And obviously they've showcased that, yeah, these are battle-hardened people, but because it almost caught me off guard being like, man, we've seen a silly side of the Northern Jaegers because we've only ever seen them in a super serious perspective. But then you get once again, you get oddballs, because Zeno and Leo can be their own oddballs when it comes to being the overprotective dads. When it comes to Fee, Rutger can be the same way, but so the Jaeger Corps have shown they can be silly, but you take Nidhogg and the Northern Jaegers, we've only ever seen them in a more serious capacity. So, but seeing them kind of cut loose a little bit and getting to see them kill enemies that you're used to from the games, like the drones they fight later on, and then also that kind of Yeti-ish creature. Obviously there's variations of that, but also that exact variation of that monster, it's a monster hunt quest in Cold Steel 2. So I also love that Lobby has no lines for a good chunk of this episode, a lot of this episode in fact. I guess she's gonna be the quiet protagonist, she just kind of keeps to herself, and everyone, the two loudmouths with her, which I'm assuming they're two of the people with her, example, the more lankier dude, I'm sure that's the guy with the red hair. They just haven't taken their helmets off because they've been given too much personality to them from just to be when she's off doing her missions later, they're not with her. It's they have to go with her. I love that, but it's hey, Rook, listen to me, and he's throwing snowball, and it turns into a full-blown three-way snowball fight. It's what are you idiots doing? It's don't worry, they may seem like untrained idiots, but and then the casualness of the monster popped up behind them. They just blasted it without even looking at it. So you can't underestimate them. I mean, being a Jaeger, you have to be pretty skilled. You aren't just some run-of-the-mill person. So I also love the line of being oh, we're going to be the second Purple Lightning, which I was she didn't get the title of Purple Lightning until after she became a Bracer, right? But it's yeah, it doesn't matter. She's still kind of because I was trying to also think too, I was would you say her name with disdain? I guess it's kind of I guess it's the same equivalency with Rain and Crossbell. It's some people don't hate you, other people do. Because I think even in 2, the Northern Jaegers had beef with Sarah when you find out about who she really is, her past. And so, I mean, even in the intro, you see a scene with Colonel Valentine. And I wonder, is that going to be flashed back to? That's why, because I don't think she's in the intro, Sarah, but I know she was a part of the Northumbria, the whole annexation situation. So the Northern War, so that's why I'm curious, is she going to pop up at all? But it might just be someone who knew Colonel Valentine, so it might kind of flash back to that, or just, we'll see. Because we saw a lot of people, I wasn't super, because I knew we'd see Altina, obviously. I figured we might see Lecter. Wasn't sure about Milliam. They didn't, I don't think they showed Claire, but they showed Rufus and Osborne. That makes sense. We obviously saw Wallace and Aurelia, so that was pretty dope. And obviously the parallels they're making, he's not going to be in this much, but he's always going to be that shadowy perspective of the Lavi being on the opposite side of Rain. And I think that's such an interesting parallel, both of these quote-unquote heroes, because Lavi comes from a hero bloodline, and obviously Rain is the new hero of the Empire, the Ashen Chevalier, so, which I legitimately, when that came up later on, when Rogan, who's kind of was it the Aurora Phenomenon, which I'm oh dude, I love these nicknames everyone's got. I was of course someone in Northumbria would have a nickname like that, but it's just yeah, whether it's someone from Ouroboros, or whether it's, Sarah, for example, with the Purple Lightning, or, even any of the Iron Bloods, I do, or Bracers too, having the nicknames. So, I do love that though. So it's like, yeah, I love they're just casually dropped. But I like that. It's like, yeah, he leaves nothing in his wake no matter where he goes. He's basically like the second guy in charge. So once kind of filling out the roster of the ins and outs of the Northern Jaegers, kind of understanding a little bit more of why they do what they do. And obviously what they mean to the community. We know that they are the main source of income for that country, because it's like, and they're also their only defenders, because they don't have a military. All they have is, I guess it's the same equivalency as like Crossbow, which obviously them both being the states that they are, it makes sense. But obviously Crossbow doesn't have a military. All they have is the CGF. That's the closest they got. It can't be officially declared as a military. I think Northumbria just doesn't have the power and resources for a military, so they kind of put it all in Jaegers. I mean, plus the Northern Jaegers have ties to, because we end up learning from, because the moment the grandmother and granddaughter that they ended up saving, as well as the mom and dad who were poisoned by the drums, I was like, oh, they need antidotes. But they referenced the revolution 27 years ago. I was like, 27 years ago? I was like, the salt pail thing? I was like, why would you call that a revolution? I was like, right, the principality situation, the prince and all that. But on that same topic, I don't know why it never crossed my mind that the salt pail spiraled up from the earth. And I can't explain why. I've always just assumed the salt pail shot down from... I don't think they've ever expressly said, like, oh, the salt pail came from the sky. That's always been an assumption on my part. And then when that little flashback, they kind of showed it kind of spiraled, like shooting up. I was like, oh, it shot up from the ground. Now, when you look at the bottom of it, because I forget about, like... I guess I always assumed that was like impact from it falling from the sky and landing, but it's like, no, it's spikes in the ground from it like spiraling up a little bit. But I'm like, because that's the first time we've ever seen any instance in the entirety of the Trail series of it actually popping up. Every other instance, we've only seen the aftermath of the pail and all its terrible, destructive nature just being already there. We've never seen it actually rising up from the ground, so that's why I just only assumed it was always from the sky. But then we got into the principality situation of like, right, the prince left, and then the prince tried to come back and be like, okay, cool, the disaster's over, so many people died, and the country's a wreck, but hey, I'm back. It's like, no. So some heroes started a revolution, which included Lavi's grandfather, which I thought was like interesting when he was like, oh, the abandoned. So I was like, I wonder, did he have ties to the royal family in some shape or form? I don't know. And then the fact is that because later on Rogan's like, oh, he abandoned. So I guess like after being the hero, after starting the revolution, maybe after some time afterwards, he abandoned that position and just went off and lived a quiet life after doing that. It's like, oh, the country was in need and you just abandoned it. Like, I don't know if there's any... Because he said the abandoned here, I thought he was referencing like, oh, some correlation to the prince and the royal family that ran away, but it's like, no, it's in correlation with the revolution. So they're obviously heralded as heroes, and they're the core foundation of the Northern Jaegers, which is interesting because now you're like, also the Northern Jaegers have only been around like 20 some years, which they've never gotten specific about the time frame of any other Jaeger Corps. Like, yeah, you learn about some of the like dropout Jaegers that are trying to make a name for themselves, being kind of like, trying to, that is about that, but it's like you never find out. Like, I think the only Jaeger Corps they've ever really talked about in the Trail series that I can think of off the top of my head is, I think there's a line of dialogue that references the Red Constellation having very long ties in, like, they've been around for a very long time. Wasn't it like didn't they say like there's a line saying like they had ties to the Berserkers or something like that. So they are the only ones that have been around for a very, very long time. But no, it's just interesting to know that the Northern Jaegers have only been around for like 20-ish years. Who knows, like, because those heroes were the core foundation of it, but we don't know when in that 20, like when after the revolution they started it. But it's like, it's definitely 20 plus years ago. So that's fascinating information. So, and obviously no one else amongst, it seems like Rogan's the only one that knows, because even everyone in like her unit doesn't know that who her grandfather is. Because she probably never drops her last name. She just goes by, because they call her Lavi, but they probably never really go into the ins and outs of her grandfather. Or maybe it's just like a lot of those records are sealed or owed, or you have to be a high ranking position to have access to that. we also got this interesting insight kind of along those same lines of there is a massive disparity between the rich and poor in this, which is so interesting. I think, well, I guess every country kind of has it to some extent, because obviously it's very prevalent in Arabonia, the whole commoner and noble situation, but it seems like it's even there to some extent, because like the rich and powerful get to enjoy the luxury and they look down on the Northern Jaegers, and like the people with lobby are like, why are they looking down on us? They wouldn't have what they have if it wasn't for us. You know, we're the grunt military grunts, obviously Jaegers. I mean, Jaegers already kind of get looked down upon regardless, but now it's also like, yeah, we're like the freedom fighters of this country and you look down upon us and we're the reason why you have what you have, while the rest of this country is suffering, like the settlement that they ended up saving in this episode. It's like, yeah, those people, yeah, it's like, right, we got this mission where we're transporting goods, but hey, let's get these people to the capital, let's help like build back up the settlement, because the reason why their drones were there in the first place, because they were running from that Yeti creature. So there was also that place they were at. It kind of reminded me of the Grand Market from Celtic. So I thought that was like, oh, because they were like, I think they referenced like, oh, it's kind of like that place in Heimdall. I was like, well, not, I mean, maybe you've never been to a specific, because I was like, where in Heimdall would that what they call it, Liberation Square. So I guess that's kind of like Dreikel's Plaza, I guess would be the closest comparison, but obviously like the market and stuff kind of reminded me. So I guess it's maybe like a combination of Dreikel's Plaza plus the Grand Market to some extent. Like I said, it's such an interesting parallel. Like, you heard about how important the Northern Jaegers are, but seeing how loved and respected they are, it's like, hey, you got to do something about this. It's like, the fact is, the government's not going to do anything. All we can do is like, oh, you Northern Jaegers, we're going to have to like, you're going to have to like pick up the slack. It's like, they are seen as like, hey, we need, I mean, they're probably more so the equivalency of a military and the bracers. The bracers are seen in the exact same light as well. So it's probably a situation of just seeing them heralded in such a way, because all you've known of once again, it's all about perspective. Just like Arabonia, like prior to playing the Code Steel games, you'll be like, oh, Arabonia sucks. And then you realize it's like, okay, like Arabonia's got its own issues, and it's not like everyone in Arabonia is all about rah, rah, rah war. Which is so interesting, because they brought up like one of Lobby's like people is kind of like, oh, I want to transfer over to Rogan's group because they're the recon group, but it's like, they're kind of warmongers, aren't they? Well, he might not be, well, I think they were specifically talking about Rogan's group being the recon group. So that was interesting. But Rogan came in being like, yo, we need to stop holding on to the past of these heroes. Those heroes who started the revolution are dead. We need to start a brand new revolution. Because they had referenced like the annexation of Crossbell, but I think it hadn't quite happened yet. Like, it's kind of happening. There's Calvert and stuff like that. They're fighting over North. And it's like, nope, the Empire just completely annexed Crossbell and Calvert lost. All because of one hero, which you're like, there's a boy inside of Valamor, but then you're also, because that's what something I was curious about too, and obviously there's photos of Rain and stuff, but I was like, dude, I wasn't sure if you'd actually get to see Rain actually in anime, or would it just be like you only get to see Valamor, and maybe you get some shots of him inside, that's about it. I wonder would there be any points he gets outside of Valamor, and like maybe just fights by, well, obviously, I wonder has the whole thing with Lloyd and Risha and Altina, has that happened at this point in time yet? Well, no, because that was in March. So yeah, no. I'm trying to think, has it happened yet? It probably already has happened timeline wise. Yeah, it should have. But it's also, like, the reason why it's also sad is because I'm, like, hearing that kind of labeled on him, like, yeah, this hero, and then you look in the inside of Valamor, and Ring has such a stoic face, because it's heartbreaking, because it's like, Ring's got, the Ashen Chevalier, the national Erebonian hero, it's, that title is a noose around his neck. You know, and it's so heartbreaking to think, because it's like, this is one of the toughest times in Reen's life. It's just having to be heralded as this hero, being separated from his friends, knowing the truth about himself, about who his father is, and just dealing with all that. Now having to be a national hero, now helping annex another country. He doesn't want to do that, but he's taken upon this role because it's like, right, me doing this ends this war. It saves lives, and it's even giving, it's like the perspective Randy had. Randy tells him, like, hey, no one in Crossbell will, like, hate you. They're not going to throw rocks at you. And he's like, I mean, 6 out of 10 people at best they're going to be okay with you. I mean, the other 4 out of 10, they're not going to, going to hate you. I mean, people aren't going to herald you around. Oh my God, the great Ashen Chevalier. No, but no one's going to outright hate you. That's what I was talking about. It's about perspective. Having the Empire's perspective, you see Reen, you're like, poor Reen. You actually feel bad. You feel bad for him. But outside of that, everyone's like, oh, that's the evil Ashen Chevalier. Because even at the beginning of Cold Steel 4, spoilers, I'm going full spoilers. I'm not holding anything back when it comes to this. But it's like, yeah, the Liberal and Crossbell Squad are like, oh, the Ashen Chevalier, Reen Schwarzer? I haven't heard the greatest things about him. It's like outside perspective, dude. It's like that on every front. And once again, just the parallels of, here's the Northumbrians being like, man, we got to look out for the Empire. But Rogan, he's going to help us stand up against the Empire. We have to start a new revolution, especially because it's like, hey, thanks to now that we know what the Empire is doing, hey, they annexed Crossbell, that place that was kind of aiming, that was the state that has always been in contention amongst Ereboni and Calvert anyway, and now on top of that, you're telling me, oh, they've already annexed that place and they're going to probably come for us next, which is true. That, I mean, they are the recon team, so they probably snuck in. Well, that's interesting considering the ultimate mission later on is to find out what the Empire's doing. So Rogan already has some idea, but I guess that's speculation. They don't know for sure, and they probably have to wait till a recon team actually goes into the Empire to be like, this is their exact plans. Which is so interesting how that happens time and time again. It's like, oh, you've had people sneaking into Erebonian territories, like Calvert sending in the Hercules squad to be like, yo, so what is the Empire about to do? So it's just the interesting parallels. It's actually sadder too, just because it happens. It's like, oh, first Crossbell. Oh, boom, now, next Northumbria. And now it's also like, knowing what, obviously the future is going to hold after the Northern War. It's just one thing after another. So I'm rambling on and on and on, but it's just like, I'm so excited. Because I finally get to be like, oh, this is this. Oh, this is that. Because I'm not that person. I'm not well versed in comics or anything like that. So, and I don't know anything as well as like I said, I think I know Kingdom Hearts pretty well, but I know me some Trails of Cold Steel. So I'm like, yo, this is my bag. Oh, this is it. I've been waiting for an opportunity to drop my massive Trails of Cold Steel knowledge. I mean, it helps when you play the game so many times, but still, it's just, I'm so excited to continue down this, in this series, to learn more about Northumbria and learn more about them, learn more about Lavi, because we got that opening where it's like her running to her grandfather picking her up, and then like the wheat fields being caught on fire. So I'm like, I wonder what's that about, because I'm sure her grandfather's dead. Like, what about her parents? Are they going too? I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to find out more about all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.